Good morning, Reiko. How are you today?
Very good, thanks. How are you?
Great. I want to thank you so much for accepting the invitation for this new project, so to speak, that we're putting together through my company, Ocasio International Advisory Services. The idea, again, is to create a space to invite international experts like yourself who work in business in different markets around the world. But the focus of this activity, this conversation we're going to have, is to really focus more on the cultural and communication aspects of doing business in a specific market. So we thank you so much for your time, and I wanted to begin with 7 questions that we're going to be focusing on. The first question is to get to know you a little bit more. Can you tell us a little bit of who you are and what you do for work, please?
Sure. Thank you. So my name is Rieko Aiba. I reside right now in Tokyo, Japan. And what I do for a living right now is a coach and a facilitator. I haven't always been a coach and a facilitator, and I started off my career in advertising, which I spent 10 plus years working with and for Japanese and international companies. I had opportunities to work in Tokyo as well as some time in LA. So it was an opportunity for me to work with like clients that are small, large, domestic, international, and also the teams that I work with, working with Japanese teams, working with international teams. So that's how I started my career. And eventually, I got very interested in, wait a minute, when we try to do good business, it all depends on people. It's the mix of people, it's the chemistry of the people, it's the relationships of the people that actually ends up creating success for business. So my interest end up going towards, what is the great combination of, good teams versus teams that don't work. And so about 5 years ago, I wanted to pursue something that focused a little bit more on people and teams. And that's how I landed in my field of coaching and training and facilitation. So basically, I help people and teams kind of dream up their best potentials and support them get to where they want to go.
Excellent, Rico, and that's exactly what I strongly believe in as well. People do business with people, so that's the core of the trust building, and that comes in with the idea of these interviews of how to incorporate the cultural aspect when you're doing business with other people in different markets. Your focus is a Japanese market, correct? But although you have experience all over the world, so the idea of this interview is to understand a little bit more of how to interact with the people in Japan. What were you, if you can briefly explain, because I know you've worked and lived abroad, what was the first, perhaps a cultural shock, or what have you seen as a challenge when you move back to Japan, or your clients face when they come into the Japanese market? Just briefly mention, and we'll get to the other questions as well.
Sure. I had a lot of experience being in Japan, working in a global agency, but there's global companies that want to enter Japan and launch their product or their services, or Japanese company wanting to go overseas. So there's like many examples of differences in the way we communicate, the way we hold meetings, the way decisions are made, and sometimes very stereotyping, but maybe Western companies tend to want to have a clear process, have a deadline, want to know all the stakeholders, but Japanese companies sometimes are very, very vague. We don't really know where the decisions are being made. We don't really know a clear deadline when it's going to come back. So kind of navigating through different people with backgrounds and their expectations on how to work was quite difficult. Managing internally within my team of diverse teams, and also on the client side, depending on whether they are a Japanese company, a big company, a small company, an international company, whether there's Japanese management and foreigners in the team, or if it's foreign management and then Japanese people on the ground. So there's a lot of dynamics that come in when you're trying to work in the market.
Well, it's exciting, and that you're the perfect person to bridge the differences between cultures, and it's exciting to have someone in this kind of interview because you really know the business. So we want to hear more. We have specific questions that are very related to what you're talking about, the dynamics, communication of teams. The second question we have is, what are some things you recommend people to do or say when first meeting and speaking with a person with whom they might initiate a new project or business opportunity together in Japan, or something that someone should not do or say? So you briefly mentioned about meetings and making decisions. These are important things, but what are your recommendations specifically? Someone coming in there, what should they do or say, and an example of what they shouldn't or not, as in general terms, when they first encounter a potential partner in Japan?
Sure. So one really important point, I think, is that Japan is a very like relationship-based culture.
Mhm.
So we want to work with people that we know, that we trust, that we can build a relationship with. So maybe an entry point to that is, firstly, like knowing somebody in the company, having something in common. So maybe a direct sales email might not get responses as much as you might expect. So it's good if somebody, somebody knows somebody in the company and get that kind of introduction. That's a very, very good way to develop that relationship. And also try to like make an impression or impact or breaking the ice. So if you do get the chance to meet with them or connect with them, the culture of omiyage, which is a small something gift
Mhm.
to bring, and then we always present it as like, oh, it's really nothing much. But it is a great way to let them know that you thought about them in advance. It's an offering. And they might unwrap it and they might talk about where it's from, and it's a great icebreaker, and it kind of represents that I'm willing to get to know you. I really want to be in your presence kind of connection. So I think that first point is about building relationships. Um, it's not just business. And that's why we want to have small talk. You want to, bring a small gift. We want to, go out to dinner with them, create, occasions that you connect with them on a personal level.
That's very interesting. I'm curious though, um, when you give the gift, are they required to open it and see it, or do you wait until they open it, or what's that dynamic after you give the gift? Just to understand.
Yeah. Um, First of all, you don't want to give like an elaborate gift, like, something like a gadget or something. It's usually like just some snacks or something. So without them opening the box, they kind of, you explain where it's from, what it is, and they will take it back to their team or the department, and then they'll eat it there. So there's no need for them to open it and like, react to it, but you can just tell them a story of why you brought that particular one. And sometimes when people come from overseas, it's great to bring something from your own culture and say, oh, this is popular in our culture, or this has this kind of significance. And I think that gets that kind of emotional connection going. So
Well, it's
they don't
fantastic.
need to. Mm.
I didn't know that. Very, very interesting. Very valuable inputs for everybody to plan ahead, bring a souvenir, bring a gift when they. Thank you so much. Very, very interesting. We going to the third question. We also recognize that it is important to have a deeper cultural understanding of a local place when doing business. What cultural aspects might be considered, should be considered when doing business in Japan? I know you could talk for a long time about different aspects, but perhaps maybe some key cultural aspects that are very important to consider when you're first entering into the Japanese market or encountering a new partner or client.
I mean, there's so many differences between other culture. And I jotted a few things down, but I
Right?
think maybe the first one is like the high context culture. And also, as I mentioned, relationship and how that reflects back to our communication. So I would say that Japanese people aren't as direct. Um, and they have this thing called tatemae and honne, which is tatemae is like kind of surface. This is how you present yourself. So you don't want to appear to be rude or, too um so you want to like kind of keep a nice relationship going, a
Okay.
nice kind of vibe going. So what you might be thinking inside the honne might not come out. It usually comes out after the meeting internally.
Okay.
So the comment that I often hear from clients that come to a Japanese meeting is like, we don't know like what was going on in that meeting. People had a blank face. People don't really show their expressions. And so you don't know. Usually they have a nice expression. There's like, interesting. That's great. But you don't know if it's a great yes or a super no. So, and they kind of reserve that one thing because it is like a consensus-based culture.
Mhm.
Maybe they don't have the decision to make there until they bring it back internally, and then they make that decision. So, you're accepting, you don't really react so much. And they might have like how they're feeling inside, but they usually won't show it. But that's not to say to like, for people to get disappointed over it, but you just need to allow a little bit more time for Japanese companies and not say, okay, when are you going to be able to give us an answer? Is this a yes or no? Like, don't pressure them and don't force them to give an answer because there's so much things that go on behind the scenes and, checking and approvals and, internal things. So, I would say, just be patient, give more time, be okay with like vagueness. Like if you're not really sure, like, does that mean a yes or does that mean a no? And they'll usually not say clearly. They're like, yes, we're gonna think about it. And just be okay with that. Um, and
Yep.
just continue to follow up and try to understand the process that's going on internally in their own companies.
No, very, very important advice. I'm sure from your own experience, I have seen this from my own experiences. A lot of business opportunities don't go through. They fall through because people don't have this patience that you mentioned. People don't understand the dynamics, so they don't wait through the process, and a great deal can just die. It doesn't go forward because of this misunderstanding, the cultural understanding that is necessary. So absolutely, spot on, important advice to take. So thank you for that. For the fourth question, which is very important because most people face a language barrier when they go to a new country. If someone does not speak Japanese, what do you suggest a foreigner do to be able to communicate more successfully with locals in Japan and to be able finally to do business there? How are they going to communicate if they don't speak Japanese?
Mm. Well, if they speak absolutely no Japanese, then you need to find a common ground. So whether you find somebody that can speak a little bit of English, you bring a translator, that's logistics, right?
Right.
But to create that atmosphere, that environment of like, hey, we're gonna try to communicate with you. I think one great way is letting them know the agenda beforehand.
Right.
Say, hey, these are the things that we're going to bring to you. These are might be the questions that we might be interested in. And Japanese people love to prepare and to know beforehand, and they don't like to be surprised so much. So documentation is important. Also, when you're, in language, it might be very difficult. So making sure that there's some kind of slides documentation that they can follow through on. And also, I think sometimes if you're conducting in English, it's, this is quite standard, but the tempo of how you speak, giving them space to think and respond. And they say Japanese people tend to have the longest length of pauses. So sometimes when we're pausing and thinking, the conversation goes on. So we kind of get behind. So just making sure that you need to slow down things, give it a pause, check in to say, is this clear for you? Would you like to ask any questions? So just, kind of making sure and letting them know that you are listening and, trying to communicate. I think, yeah, just being very, very clear and upfront about what you're there for, how the meeting's going to go, and what you want out of it, and what kind of responses that you would like from them, upfront, I think is like really, really important thing.
No, very clear. No, thank you for these tips. It is very different in other cultures. I've seen, and it's very refreshing to understand the context, not just speaking Japanese, but it's this context of the pause, of the patience, and that's something that we have to adapt to if we go to the Japanese market. Thank you for that. The fifth question is a little bit more business side, but it's more focused on. Well, let me ask the question to explain as well. To get better results in visibility or sales, what are your recommendations on the most effective ways to do marketing for products and services in Japan? And I think this question, I wanted to focus more on how communication is done in the market, what kind of channels is most commonly used by companies there. So a little bit more in that sense of how to get your word out as a business in the Japanese market.
This one I don't think is like too unique to Japan in terms of marketing and getting your services and products out to the market. I mean, it's still quite heavily relied on like TV. The older generation still watches a lot of TV. There's some newspapers, but of course it's all shifting more towards digital. So digital marketing, PR, as well as because it is like the heavy on TV and newspaper, still having press events, getting it picked up, like doing an event and getting it picked up by a TV station is still a pretty, you know, uh, big way to get the news out to the general market. But guess more and more it's more digital, using influencers, getting it into a kind of advertorial kind of media as well. So I don't think it's that different from other countries.
Right, Rico, that's a good point. Because I know a lot of people in some countries, TV they don't use as much either. But let's go to the consumers, for example. Would the Japanese consumers receive more, let's say, marketing material through their WhatsApp, through email, through Instagram? This differs a little bit. I've seen this in different countries. It differs a little bit. What is your take on how a company can reach more consumers through these kind of social medias, or yeah, examples of those as well? Do you think that would be more effective in Japan?
I mean, that one is like dependent on the generation, you know?
Okay.
So the older generation still gets a lot of information from TV and newspapers, and even postings on that you get in
Sure.
the mail. Um, and as opposed to the younger generation that are more prone to, getting information from Instagram or Facebook or something like that. And WhatsApp is not a common chat tool in Japan. We use mostly Line. Um, but Yeah, I don't, my personal experience with Line is that I don't really get a lot of like product or service advertising or information there. Um, how I'm most influenced is through like when my friends use something or my friends recommend. So of course, I think that's always a really, really strong factor in trying to, promote your product. So getting as many users in Japan to experience your product and then have them talk about it is always
No, perfect. All
uh,
these examples are extremely useful. If I was a company that was looking to market, everything you said right now has to be taken into account. Depending on what product it is, absolutely, what segment you're selling to. So, very clear. I think you explained it very well, the different aspects, and then the company has to analyze themselves what they're selling and to who, and to then decide what channel. So, very
yeah,
clear.
maybe one thing that I wanted to say is sometimes when companies come in and I think Japan has a sense of like we're very unique in the market. Like we're not like any other market. So you don't want to just bring something like, oh, it's for APAC, or it's like, oh, it's worked in our country,
Sure.
and I've seen so many times where companies and we believe that we're very, very unique, that whatever worked there isn't going to work here. So I think just in talking, it's great to show some evidence from other markets, but then to acknowledge that Japan is a unique market and Japan has specific cultures. So let's try to adapt and let's try to develop something that works uniquely for Japan. So that maybe also is like respect and a relationship building involved. But I've just seen so many times where like brands had kind of reacted so much to a plan that was just copied from APAC to Japan, and the marketing department really reacting to it. So
I hope the companies watching this are taking notes because because it makes a whole difference in the market. Absolutely. No, thank you. Thank you for the explanation. Moving to the sixth question. I thought about this more of a like going back to what you said many times, a personal connection, which is very important. If a business partner in Japan wants to get to know you better and invites you to a local coffee shop or a tea shop or a restaurant, or even if they're virtual to have, let's say, a virtual happy hour, what are the kinds of topics people in Japan would be talking about in this more informal setting, not business related? So you're getting to know the person. What will you be talking about with your Japanese partner um, when you're traveling there or virtually? What's important to get in this trust building exercise you mentioned?
well, I think as with everybody, people start talking about the weather because we're very sensitive to the weather, that the seasons change.
Okay.
So we're always there's always an awareness of, oh, it's starting to, have you seen the blossoms? Have you seen the little sprouts? Like, oh, the weather, it's very sticky in August. We always like to kind of be aware and notice that. And I mean, that's always like an icebreaker, but I think people like to talk about food a lot.
Right.
Um, it's one of the biggest questions people ask when there's foreigners, like, what's your favorite Japanese food? So, and they even talk about it. So I actually made for a friend a t-shirt that said my favorite food is, because that's just so widely questioned. Any other news topic, things in the media. But one thing that I had talked with a friend of, like, that people don't talk about so much is people generally don't talk about politics too much, or like religion, even like so much in business context or like amongst friends. It's a topic that doesn't come up as often as if I were to be hanging out with friends that in an international context. So it's not that you can't talk about it, you can ask questions about it, but people might not be as used to explaining to you what their political views are and what's going on in Japan. So something a little bit more casual, and people like to talk about, what's really unique about us. So food and travel and technology and things like that. I think people would be very happy to share their experience.
Oh, fantastic. I mean, this is what the breaking the ice is very important in trust building, and it's important to understand people are sensitive about talking about different specific topics, people in different markets, different countries. So very, very helpful what you told us. I had no idea. So I know when I meet a Japanese, I know exactly what I should be avoiding. But very helpful, very interesting, very interesting. Yeah, the seasons. No, thank you so much. Coming to the last question, it's the shortest question, but I think it's one of the most important questions because when you want to get to know somebody, let me go to the question. Then I think it's important. What one word or phrase should everyone learn to say in Japanese, and why? And I asked this question before you answer because you've mentioned this many times, which I really agree with, and is that you want to show an effort that you're connecting to the local culture. You want to make a positive impression. And I think learning some words in different languages shows this effort. It's a positive thing. I think that when you're connecting with people in different countries, a positive word, obviously, not a negative or a bad word, but I think it's really important. I myself have learned how to say thank you in several languages around the world, because I think it connects with the people. So in Japan, what would you say is one word or a phrase, let's say, and why is it important to learn?
Cool. And I totally agree with just picking up the language because it shows your effort to connect with them. And the word is yoroshiku onegai shimasu. This is a really good one. And it's okay if you get it wrong, but it's the effort that counts, right?
Okay.
Might write it down somewhere, but yoroshiku onegai shimasu is a word that can be used at the very beginning of the meeting, at the end of the meeting, saying, please, what would be the clear definition?
If you can paraphrase it if you want.
Yoroshiku. Onegai is please. Yoroshiku is like maybe like blessing or in good harmony. So you could say that to say before the meeting, hey, let me kind of get into this meeting and let us like work together. And at the very end of the meeting, you could say, okay, so we talked about this. Let's get please let us continue to keep going on this, or it doesn't have like a clear definition. It's something that we use to let people know that you are in gratitude to them, and you're kind of depending also on them to continue working with you. So I never thought of the meaning of it, and I thought, wow, it's a very difficult word to define because it probably doesn't exist in English. But yoroshiku onegai shimasu, you can use it, when you ask somebody to do something and they say yes. Yoroshiku onegai shimasu. Like, I'm thankful that you're gonna do that. So it's
fantastic. Please, can you write that down for me? Email me how it's spelled. Great word. It's a great word.
Gonna try?
It's a great. No, I have to read it first. But I know in my own language, Portuguese, there are words that you can't translate. You have to explain like you were doing right now. I understood it, so it was very clear. Fantastic word. Yeah, I'm going to ask you to spell it out for me, and I'll practice. Thank you so much. Very, very, very helpful. No, thank you. I think Rieko, the interview was. I've learned a lot. I'm sure everybody watching is also learning. Thank you for being part of this project, this cross-cultural communication space that we're creating here. Your insights, recommendation, valuable experiences, very important. It shows how competent, how prepared of a professional you are. So I encourage anybody who wants to learn about the Japanese market or enter the Japanese market to enter in contact with you as well. A little self-promotion for you, because I really think you can add a lot of value to the companies wanting to enter the Japanese or getting to know the Japanese market. I hope this interview does benefit you and leads to new collaboration as well with partners from around the world. So thank you. You have any final words before we end the interview?
No, it's been a pleasure to talk about it. And I probably mentioned one of the 10 points of things that I wanted to do, and I love talking about culture. So thank you so much for the experience. And I think for me, I really enjoy working with teams that have different cultural backgrounds, and how they can really work together in a team. So yeah, I hope if anybody has an opportunity of coming into Japan or doing business in Japan, there's always gonna be some, challenges of how to communicate, how to hold a meeting. So I'd be very, very happy to support with that. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Arigato. That's one word. Arigato, which I think is important. Thank you in Japanese. Thank you so much. And I'm sure a lot of people will be reaching out to you and hope you have a lot more success as well. Thank you so much, Reiko. Bye.
はい、ありがとうございます。